I'm Bryce Butler from Access Ventures, and this is More Than Profit, a show where I talk with founders, investors, entrepreneurs, and leaders of all kinds about living and working with purpose, how they do it, and why. Last week on More Than Profit, we really tried to define some terms leading into Season 3 and address some of the difficulties that asset owners and managers face related to building a more intentionally constructed and dynamic portfolio. Make sure to check it out if you haven't to get a baseline for this season and the conversation as we dive deeper. My guest this week is a leading voice, and from the inception of her family office 10 years ago, literally baked these tenets of a one-pocket mindset into the formation of how they think about their responsibility as citizens and asset owners. Liesel Pritzker Simmons is the co-founder and principal at the Blue Haven Initiative with her husband and partner, Ian Simmons, and who literally said that where you put your money is a moral decision. The goal of this season is to share stories and strategies of fund managers building the future, quite literally, of what many of us hope to invest in. And I wanted to kick off this season talking with a leading voice and leading thinker about her journey and the future of her work and this industry more broadly. Well, Liesel, so I am actually, this is an odd way to start off, but I'm the father of 4 daughters, and we've watched you on the screen, on the big screen. So I generally people that have listened to More Than Profit before would have known, like, okay, we start with generally, early years, kind of what's informed and influenced you, and so we can Google you, and there's just a lot out there. So we don't need to go that direction. I really would be curious from your perspective. There's everything that everybody talks about, Liesel, and kind of your background. What though are you most thankful for in your early years of life? What kind of do you look back on and wish people actually knew more about from the early years of growing up, and maybe even informed and influenced the things that you're focused on today?
Yeah, well, that's yes. Having 4 daughters, I'm sure you've watched more of A Little Princess than you care to.
It's great. It's great. On repeat.
I know. It's fun. I have 2 daughters, but they're a little bit little yet. They haven't seen it yet.
Okay.
But I know, I'm like, I can't wait. But it's interesting because yes, I spent the first half of my life, really from 7 until about 20, as an actor. And I mean, I did some film, but I mostly did a whole lot of theater. And I was quite busy with that, which I think is good when you're young, and it kind of keeps you out of trouble when you have to be at the theater, every night between 7 and 11, keeps you out of trouble.
Sure.
But actually it's really interesting. I feel like having a theater background and an acting background has actually, there's some interesting skill sets that I have found have served me as an investor, mostly around reading power dynamics in rooms. Who has the power, who wants it. I mean, that's mostly what you're doing in rehearsal, in theater is breaking down power dynamics, and then the tension that ensues around it, which is essentially a board meeting, right?
Yeah.
So I've actually found that it's not a terrible background to have. Also, you have an extremely patient view of failure and rejection. So when you are getting rejected many times a week to your face in auditions, the idea of a startup going under, like, it's okay. It happens. Investments go south, they go north, things work out, they don't. Nothing necessarily needs to define your career. So I think some things like that have served me as I've, made the natural transition from actor to impact investor.
But I think the power dynamics piece is brilliant. I think a lot of times the conversations I've had with asset holders or fund managers, they actually forget oftentimes the humanity of the person or the company. They look at the numbers, right? And the numbers don't lie is kind of the old adage, right? The numbers don't lie. And I think when you kind of get them to snap back in and say, oh, wait a minute, that's a person across the table, or, this is someone who's vulnerable. You talk about rejection, like many founders, and you guys do direct deals as well. Then when they come in, they're not just bringing you something they want you, they're bringing you their baby. They're bringing you something, and it's like, hey, what do you think about this? And with the minute you open your mouth as an investor and you say something, it means more than just like a yes or a no or a maybe. There's a lot going into that. So I actually love the story that you have of childhood actress to impact investor, because I hope that more people that are in this space, working with asset holders, holding fund managers accountable, recognize the power that they have and how to use that power more wisely. So what does that look like for you at, right now, obviously Blue Haven and many other initiatives, but what does that look like as you are working with, whether it's a company to invest in, a nonprofit initiative that you're working on, or a fund manager you're giving consideration for? How does that go into your thinking at Blue Haven?
Well, so now, what we've built up, so Blue Haven will turn 10 officially as a family office next year. I know we were like, oh my God. Since we sort of formalized the family office with this kind of all-in strategy. And what we have tried to do over the years, I think it's similar with an audition, right? If it's not the right fit, you know it immediately. And the humane thing to do is to say, sounds great, nothing personal, it's not a great fit for us. And so I think that's one thing that I've really learned is, if it is not a good fit, say no quickly, and don't waste an entrepreneur or a fund manager's time. So that's one thing we've I hope gotten better at. I think I really sucked at that early on, because I wanted to learn what, hear more about the fund, hear more. And I didn't quite know what my own investment thesis was early on. So I was a whole lot slower to say no early on. So I think that's one thing that we've hopefully really changed, to try to respect people's time. And you put your blood, sweat, and tears into every pitch you make. You don't want to be led on by a potential investor. That's not very nice. But I think also we've tried to be quick, but also very honest of, this is something that's interesting. It is a little too early for us. Come back to us in 6. We don't really try to play hide the ball. Or if we have other investors, we try to be helpful with other introductions as well. I think fairly typical, hopefully best practices amongst other investors. But I do think that, and then making sure with investments that we have made, whether it's companies or fund managers, really trying to elevate them and highlight these excellent fund managers and companies and what they're doing. And whether it's on our own social media or hosting events with other investors for them. But we try to amplify the investments that we do make in any way that we can. So I think those are some of the things.
That's great.
On the sort of power dynamic front. Another big piece as well, because we do understand that we do have a lot of power as asset owners. A big thing that we've been supportive of over on kind of our civic engagement side, which is more on the philanthropy, is around, appropriate taxes for people like us, like a wealth tax or other ways that actually we as asset owners can be accountable to our own communities. And so that's something else that we take very seriously,
That's
not
great.
so much on the investment side, but
well, they're not mutually exclusive, right? You're recognizing as an asset owner, okay, I have a responsibility to this company or this fund manager to be honest, to be upfront, but then also like, okay, I'm an asset owner, so I have a responsibility to my community, and so I should be taxed appropriately and support the efforts that really help the community at large. So I think those are two great ends of the spectrum, I think, coming together. which is what I love about kind of your strategy at Blue Haven. And we'll get into that in a little bit. But I like this idea of, we kind of say the same thing around the power dynamics of like a quick no is oftentimes just as good as a yes. And it's kind of counterintuitive because a lot of times companies or fund managers, we think we're doing them a service by, telling them the things that we think they want to hear, which is like, oh, this is awesome. Like, come back, let's talk some more. And the reality is it's like, we're just stringing them along. And they're busy. Their time is precious, just as precious as ours. And we owe them the respect and to tell them like, hey, great idea, just doesn't fit. And, maybe I can make an introduction if it makes sense, but I'm sorry, or come back to us. We love it. It's just too soon. I love that getting to that kind of honest, quick conversation is super helpful to the other party. And really, I think is endearing. I'm sure you found as well.
Well, and also we do a lot of analysis also, particularly on our direct investing side of the ventures that we say no to, and kind of what was the reason? Was it because it was just totally outside of our geography or our scope of work? Was it because the founder misspelled something in a deck? Was it because they we genuinely don't think they have a very big market, or like what were the things? Because I think one of the things that sometimes we talk a lot about in impact investing is, supporting emerging managers, or, looking for unique kinds of track record or experience to bring to something that isn't necessarily a sort of Silicon Valley tech bro. But then when we're faced with it in our inbox, we kind of revert back to what we say we're not going to do. And, we've found that ourselves when we're, just, within Blue Haven, and we're like, oh, wow, look at all the women that we didn't invest in because we said they were too early, or they weren't being aggressive enough in their projections or things like that. And so, and that's changed our investing style as well. Because I do think that sometimes perceived risk is not really is not there, but we have to keep reminding ourselves, because there's a lot of rhetoric around it, and particularly now around women and people of color, and how egregiously underinvested they are. Well, then we actually need to actually then move money into those places if we want to take advantage of what I think is an amazing economic opportunity that we're all overlooking.
Well, we'll get back to the investment side. I think one of the things that right now would be great to rewind the clock a little bit, because you said Blue Haven's 10 years old. And what I think was really impressive was from the formation of Blue Haven, you and your husband basically determined and declared that we're going to make this an aligned strategy with our values. There's a lot of great quotes out there about that we have a moral obligation to know where this capital is going. And at the end of the day, that is impact investing, it's a moral imperative. And so whether that's giving or whether that's investing, we need to be doing this. And so help me understand, how did you even get to that? Like, what influenced Blue Haven from the earliest days to even go that direction?
Yeah, I mean, so I think a large part of this as well is a little bit of, I have an inheritor's mindset. I come from a business family. I inherited control over my assets when I was 21. And, that's not money I made. I made a little bit from A Little Princess, not nearly this much. Does not pay as well as hospitality acting, turns out.
Well, especially over the many decades, right? I mean, so.
No, exactly. And theater, absolutely not.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, but joking aside, so I inherited control over my assets when I was 21. And I am very well aware of the fact that those aren't assets that I earned. I got born lucky. They were passed on to me, and I'm going to pass them on to future generations. Again, I think I should be taxed a hell of a lot more than I am now, but I'm still planning on stewarding those assets to the next generation. So now for the brief period of time that they're in my hands, I'm responsible for them. I'm responsible for what they're doing in the world. Whether or not I want to talk about it or not, they're doing things. All of those investments are doing something. And so I want to know what that is. And the more you learn about what your assets are doing or could be doing, I think the more you lean into kind of the impact side of things. And honestly, it's just more fun and interesting. It really is. That's where the fun stuff is. And so
it really is.
And so that's kind of the moral imperative piece of it. And that also drove the decision to use all of our assets, because I don't understand how you can hold that point of view and just say, oh, but only with this, like my assets only have an impact, but just this 30% of them, like that does not hold water as a concept. And so that really kind of then, when Ian and I kind of sat down, we were like, all right, well, we definitely need to pay attention to what our assets are doing, which means we want them to have a positive impact. And we have to do it with everything. And we want to do it in a diversified and a prudent manner.
Sure.
And we are pretty sure that there are going to be enough great opportunities out there that we can actually do this. And that was kind of the premise from where we started. The other thing that has morphed along the way, that we didn't necessarily, we've sort of discovered as we go, which I think sort of sounds obvious now. But we've really started to pay attention to what we cannot address or should not address in our investment portfolio. So, not everything is a market-based solution that can scale beautifully. Some things are awesome, and markets and investments and VC and, bond issuances and things like that. The market mechanisms are fabulous for scaling. I think clean tech has a ton of great examples in that space. Financial services, different insurance products, things like that, where markets and business is a great driver of scale. And then there are other areas that I think are super important, that markets and businesses either shouldn't touch or do a terrible job when they do. And those are things that I think, our tax dollars should go towards things that, look, I'm a theater girl. Theater is not sustainable, but it is wildly important. And people love it. But it is not, you cannot pay for a show just through ticket sales unless you're Hamilton.
Right.
And so the thing is that doesn't mean that it's not super valuable. It means that a venture-backed theater company is a terrible idea.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing that we've really tried to do as well is say, is this an investable? Should our investment portfolio be touching this issue at all? And if so, is this the right way to do it? And if not, does this move over to our philanthropy? Does it move over to our policy work? Like, what's the appropriate sort of lens through which to view that solution? So that's often been a source of a lot of no's lately, is like, this isn't, markets shouldn't touch this.
And I love, so everything you are articulating, I'm like, yes, preach on, this is great. because the things that I was writing as I was taking notes as you were talking, but like the first thing that really resonated with me, and I think that I hope resonates with our listeners, is the reality that this is fun. Like, where your heart is as a person, right? Your values, what drives you, what you're passionate about, it's going to activate you. Like, you're going to be inspired. It happens to everybody, And so I think when we think about aligning our values with our investments or our strategies around community development or whatever that may be, it's going to activate those passions. And so it's fun. It's not a financial model that gets most people excited. Some people, like my chief investment officer, it gets him excited. But that's why, there's different people for different things, right? Yeah. But I think what I love is like, yes, this is fun. It doesn't mean it's easy. So the second thing I wrote down, which I think is awesome, is there have to be opportunities out there for this. And also what I'm picking up on too is if there aren't opportunities, how can we help maybe create some of those opportunities? And I've seen you do that through different initiatives that you've been a part of, whether it's Global Impact Investment Network or the Impact, recognizing the gaps that exist and saying, okay, what can we do to help build the market, build the field, close these gaps, create more opportunities for fund managers? So we've got to have that foresight, and I think that vision for the future. And then I love this idea that not everything is a market solution. Because I think oftentimes what people hear is like, it's gotta be, if it's not scalable, i.e. venture backable, it's not cool or impressive. And I it's funny when I talk to people about like, only 1% of companies ever take venture. So we've gotta get creative with how we deploy capital. And we've gotta give people a vision that like, just because you're not taking venture doesn't mean it's not an impactful or an impressive or a worthwhile endeavor. Like, we owe it to the world, our communities, and these people to create solutions that help get them to what they need. So I love it. It's great.
I agree. I think that how few companies and how few, businesses and capital markets actually are sort of venture backed or make sense to be venture backed versus the noise. Good God, they're a very loud community.
Yeah.
And
they are. Well, I think what I love is people make intentional decisions. Like I honestly think I try to tell some people, don't go venture. Like, what do you like? I really try to start with, what are you trying to do in the world? What do you care most about? Don't buy into that noise because because a lot of times even founders that have potentially scalable solutions, their passion, their baby is that solution. And they don't recognize the minute they give away equity, ownership, there's got to be some form of exit for those investors. And an exit oftentimes means they're not doing what they're doing. And so it's like, okay, how can we reorient this? Like, how can we take our cues off of companies like New Belgium or Buffer or some of these really cool companies that are doing it differently because their passion is actually the people that are working on this product more than 5 to 7 years out.
And what do you think? We've done like a touch of this, and we're looking at more of kind of the sort of revenue-based financing and things like that. Is that something like I'm starting to see more of that happening, which I think is really exciting?
It is extremely. We actually have a couple of those funds in our portfolio. So we just invested in Colab Capital out of Atlanta, and just super impressed with their strategy. And we had Jewel on a previous podcast, just talking about the model that they have around supporting founders of color, recognizing that it doesn't need to just be venture, looking at a profit sharing model. But I love it. I mean, I love it because these are companies that are creating jobs. And in a place like Louisville, where we are, a lot of them aren't venture backable because they've and one, honestly, venture may not be the best solution for a Louisville because if they're going to scale to that point, they've got to go to Boston, they've got to go to New York, or they've got to go to San Francisco. That's just where the capital is and different things. And so like if we're really trying to create economic vitality in mid-America and these flyover states, if you will, we've got to come up with different solutions. And so from a fund manager, that's why I love like community investment management, what Jacob Haar and Mike Hokinson have been building and supporting some of those kind of channel partners that are deploying capital differently. So I love it. I think we need more of it because I think it still is such an early nascent field, and still a lot of investors don't understand the impacts on the term sheets, and service providers are uncertain of it. So there's a lot of education that really needs to happen there too.
Yeah.
So
no, I think that would be great. Yeah, we're still trying to wrap our heads. It's like there's some, I don't know. There was one thing I was looking at, and like we got scared about a tax situation. We couldn't kind of wrap our heads around how it would get from a tax perspective. So I'm eagerly watching.
Yeah, it is tough. So let's share notes on that because it's an important thing, which kind of leads me to the next thing because I'm sure you have a similar. You're 100% mission aligned. You've been that since day one, but it's got to be a journey, I'm sure. And we always say, like, even though we're mission aligned in our deployment as well, we're always looking at ways, how can we get better? How can So what are some lessons you've learned, and what are you currently focused on in really improving the work of Blue Haven towards not just like 100% mission alignment, but like really more deeply and intentionally constructing your portfolio around what you care most about?
So I think, I mean, it's taken many years and a lot of help to sort of start to fill out the portfolio. I think one of the things that that we've done is, I mean, we tried to keep a fairly kind of a fairly broad universe of what we kind of consider impact. And what we were really looking for is, you know, if we're looking at a certain fund, like the first lens that we consider it through is its, you know, sort of financial profile. So how liquid is it? How long's the lockup? Like, you know, what's the risk return profile for what it is? And does that fit into our asset allocation?
Sure.
And then within that, you know, if let's say we're looking for a VC fund to fill out our allocation for the year, we'll get a little bit narrow around like, okay, we're looking at, you know, US health tech. But then we really want to meet the managers and hear what their strategies are, instead of saying it's got to be diabetes prevention or it's got to be, you know, COVID related, or it's got to be at that point. If we want to get narrow enough that we are getting exposure to the sector that strategically we want to, and then it's all about the thesis of the manager.
Great.
And is that someone that we want to get on board with for 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, and that's great I think there's two things that I really resonated with. One, we have to put, what are the financial expectations? That has to be on the table. I mean, I think we can't ignore that. Like looking at our assets and saying, okay, where does this fit in the landscape? What are we hoping to accomplish? It needs to be part of the filter and the lens. But then, like you said earlier, you know, there have to be opportunities within that scope, within that framework, to align our mission and values with this financial outlook. So I love that, where it's like not putting that aside, not saying, okay, let's go after some sort of health tech venture fund, and then I hope it's going to get some sort of financial performance that fits but to say, no, like, what are we trying to do with this capital?
Yeah. And you know, and to be honest about, you know, okay, yes, a lot of the, you know, direct investments and interesting, some of the interesting funds are less liquid, but I have to have liquidity.
Yeah.
You know, like we need to, you know, we have to be realistic about how we're, you know, paying the bills, funding our philanthropy, paying our, you know, like
Sure.
We can't kind of get ourselves into a trap. And so I think that's a big part of it too. And where we've actually spent a lot of time is over on the public side.
Yeah.
You know, we have we're a taxable entity. We have a very high muni bond allocation. I mean, if you think about what a municipal bond is supposed to do from an impact perspective, it's very cool. You know, usually you don't hear a lot about muni bonds, you know, at impact investing conferences. I feel like you're hearing more, but you know, that's a huge market. Paying attention to how our municipality, like, can we actually see what the impacts of those bonds are more, you know, are certain can you favor certain jurisdictions that are chronically underinvested in, areas with, you know, higher rates of poverty that need more sanitation or more infrastructure bonds, things like that you can filter through the portfolio that are liquid,
yeah.
You know, I mean, or depending on your duration, but anyway, yeah, relatively speaking to venture. And so, you know, but they never get quite enough love, I feel like, in the impact space as well, but can offer a nice balance to the portfolio.
No, and that's really helpful. One thing I was curious about, if you could speak to, one of the things I like about Blue Haven is you've got the policy work, you've got the philanthropy, then you've got the investment strategy, which I think is really awesome. And I think I don't want to like skip over kind of that structure, because what I love is the policy work you're doing, I have to believe, and this is what I'd love to speak to, I have to believe is informed by what you're seeing through your investment portfolio and what your fund managers are experiencing. And then also what your philanthropy is identifying as pain points in local communities. Can you talk to me about kind of that crossover work that you're seeing between all the different things that you're into?
Definitely. So I'll start with a philanthropy example. And very much, I mean, to your point, we sort of see ourselves as investors first, and then the philanthropy, we get inspiration from things that piss us off in our investment portfolio. And
I love that.
And then the philanthropy is like kind of the liquid, like that kind of fills in. So one example of that is our venture portfolio, which is run by my colleague Lauren Cochran, focuses on renewable energy access, fintech, and logistics companies in sub-Saharan Africa, and they all have sort of a tech-enabled sort of component, and they are VC ready companies. But one of the things we're seeing, and this is not just unique to investments on the continent, but kind of generally speaking all over, is it's kind of up to the company to do a lot of the job upskilling that you're going to need. Yes, there are some external boot camps and things like that, but sometimes you're hiring someone and investing in them and you don't even know what their job is going to be in 5 years because the space is moving really quickly. Teams are being decentralized and distributed, and you might have a tech team over in Warsaw, and then you've got a couple of developers in Cape Town, but then you're headquartered in Dakar. Like there's all kinds of different things that are moving around, and different pieces of the puzzle. But what we are also finding, though, is that the function of HR, finding a super visionary, strategically minded head of people who is saying, I'm going to dive in super early. I mean, usually startups wait. And then they hire a head of people when they're like about to have a lawsuit.
Gosh.
Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
So it's never a function. Everyone's like, oh, as long as, everybody's salary being paid and compliance functions are fine. But really people management and HR, the future of HR, we think is very much tied to future of work. It's going to be happening at the job level. And we think having strategically minded CHROs that understand this and can put in predictive analytics on productivity of their own workforces and really can help their CEOs understand from a people perspective what expansions looks like or sounds like, is really important. And we've seen our companies as they grow, where they hit a bottleneck is usually it's a people issue. It's a hiring issue. It's a management issue. And so what we started to do is work with a couple of consultants to put together like a 21st century, like absolutely world-class state-of-the-art HR leadership course. So it's targeting heads of people at fast-growing tech companies with total best-in-class thought around what incredible companies are doing internally, externally. What's your best tech? What's your, what do you need to sort of think about and bring to your CEO to really get this on the board's agenda and things like that. So we're building this program out using our philanthropic dollars. And it's, not just for our own portfolio companies, of course, but for anyone else in the tech ecosystem. And what's been really fun is as we've been, building it out and starting to show some of the content to, even like people that we want to even have guests speaking at it, they're like, wait, I want to take this course. Like, I don't know some of this stuff.
That's awesome.
So things like that around, a program like that might be able to cover its own costs. It's never going to make a ton of money, and that's not the intention. It's a training It's really a training and a leadership course. But we think it could be really influential and really up the game of a lot of these super fast growing tech companies that people are starting to pay more attention to.
Mm-hmm.
So things like that. So that's like where our philanthropy then, we're like, oh, okay, well, let's invest in this program with our philanthropic money.
Yeah.
And it will hopefully just benefit everybody.
Well, it's a win. It's the win-win. It's the, you're helping, you've identified a problem in the ecosystem, and you're using the appropriate capital to help solve for that across not just the companies you're working with directly. You've identified that problem, but it's now a service that can be accessible to any number of people. And now you've elevated the workforce in a certain market while also then benefiting the companies that you're working through on the investment side as well.
Well, and that's, and it's really it's a future of work and a talent and a human capital play. You read all these studies about future of work, and it's usually about kind of education to employability. But then who's setting the agenda once you're employed? Who's doing that training on the job, and how do they know? How do they make the business case to their CEOs for why this is important kind of going forward? So that's part of what we're
that's interesting.
Part of what we're working on, which is kind of fun.
And I love to, like, it's interesting. We were talking recently with an organization, a utility actually, that is, because of COVID, rightfully have a lot of customers that can't pay. And so affordability is something that they're struggling with on a day in and day out basis. And they're like, well, is that the right problem? Because they're thinking like the only levers I can pull are, cost, like the rates of the utility, or infrastructure improvements that reduce the overall cost of consumption. So therefore making it more accessible. And so what I was trying to help them see is like, well, wait a minute. If the issue is they're not able to afford the bill, what does it look like for you to now advocate for a $15 minimum wage? When would you ever get involved in something like that? Because ultimately, if they actually have a higher standard of living, they're now more likely to pay the utility because they want that. They need that. And it's not, they just can't afford it. And so, I'm sure you run into that all the time where it's like, thinking outside the box and coming to it from this integrated approach, this consciously this is what we want to see in the world. How can we best solve those problems? I've got to believe is a really, one, rewarding and fun, as you said, but also like really hits the root of many of these community problems.
Well, and I think that's one of the reasons then that we focus a lot on kind of the civic work as well. So whether it's, direct support for leaders that we want to see in office because we think their policies will create a more equitable future for everyone, but, supporting specific policies as well, like a wealth tax. I can sit here all day long and talk about how much I love the investments in our portfolio. They will not touch inequality in this country the way a wealth tax would. Period. The end. I don't care how many amazing battery companies or diabetes, it's just not going to touch it the way a wealth tax, an overarching federal wealth tax, would. You would cover, listen, that's the only way, you could take those assets and cover universal childcare every year for everyone in the country.
Isn't that crazy?
That moves the needle.
Yeah.
That moves the needle, and so that's where we really kind of push for things like that and try to put our money where our mouth is in that sense on the civic side. And so, where markets can be helpful, we like that. But
sure,
an investment portfolio, let me put it this way: our VC portfolio is not going to solve inequality in the United States.
Yeah. Period. Exactly. Well, Liesel, we could talk all day, and I'd love to, but I appreciate your time. I wanted to kind of close on, because this season we're really focused on, this notion of a consciously constructed and dynamic portfolio. You're gracious to give us time and talk about how you've been thinking about that with Blue Haven. And we've heard this kind of movement in the impact space for quite some time. Even last year at the Sorensen Impact Summit, they were talking about how it's going mainstream. But I wonder, you as a pioneer and as a leader and a powerful voice in this community, What gives you hope as we kind of press towards that future? And then I think subsequently, what gives you pause? Like what concerns you? Because oftentimes when things go mainstream, so to speak, there are good things and then there are also bad things. And people jump on that bandwagon because they see dollar signs. So like what gives you hope and what gives you pause as we press forward?
Well, I think what gives me hope is just and I think particularly in the last 4 years, there's been a bit of a comeuppance of what the private sector can do on its own versus when we really do need strong government institutions that work for us at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level, and at the global level, right? We need global infrastructure, multilateral organizations, things like that are really important. I guess when I started my impact investing journey, I feel like the pendulum had swung so far to like the private sector will win and the private sector will do everything. And then what gives me hope is that I'm starting to see it swing back. And I think a lot of that had to do with people saw, whoa, when we have a government that is not, we took for granted what the government actually does. We thought it was all us doing all this fabulous stuff. And turns out we actually do need a strong, I think people started to appreciate that a little more. So I think hopefully we can move into the next few years with a little humility around our public sector partners and how important we are to each other. So that actually gives me a whole lot of hope. Seeing, things moving so fast on the climate front, things like that gives me a whole lot of hope. And seeing the private sector kind of cheering it on.
Yeah.
So that gives me hope. What gives me pause, I think, is sort of a similar thing that, this has always kind of given me pause, is that sometimes people are looking for the impact investing space to somehow be easier or more like like they want a button to push, they want a database to sort through, they want to click here and invest there, and like almost like trying to get out of actually doing the work. Everyone is like, oh, it's too hard. I don't know where the fund managers are. And it's like, yeah, that's your job, is to you have to gotta do it, right? Like it turns out there isn't just a list of things to buy that make you a billionaire. We actually have to kind of like do the work and consider these things, and not everything is super straightforward. We can see this with sort of the messiness in ESG data, different, data service providers. And I think there's a lot of nuance to this work. And what gives me pause is when I see investors coming in that kind of want to take the nuance out. I don't mind friction. I think friction is good and it makes you more thoughtful. So that's my only pause of just like, yeah, if it feels like you need to go back and consider something, or you needed to have another conversation, like that's okay. Yeah. It's part of the work. Exactly and right. So that's my only thing of seeing new people coming in, and it's like they just want a list, and they want it to be the right list, and it needs to be perfect.
If you're just now learning about the Blue Haven Initiative, make sure to check them out at bluehaveninitiative.com and on Twitter to follow along on their journey. Thanks again for listening to More Than Profit. And if you like what you've heard, then do us a favor by subscribing and leaving us a review wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Bryce Butler with Access Ventures. Thanks for listening.